It is a breezy April morning in one of the river valleys of northern Italy. A light wind carries the smell of roasting meat through the Gothic camp as people bustle about preparing the feast. The Arian bishop mutters a prayer for a holy mass to celebrate Easter Sunday. A dignified atmosphere is soon broken by one of the old, experienced Gothic warriors yelling in urgency, his hand pointed far away at Roman standards that could be seen emerging from the hills. The camp dwellers scrambled to their feet, rushing for their weapons. The battle that would shape the future of the Western Roman Empire was about to begin. It is early September of the year 394 AD. The sounds of battle in the Frigidus Valley lapse into silence as Emperor Theodosius emerges victorious on the field. A bloody, protracted affair that claimed the lives of thousands on both sides. The battle was a costly victory for Theodosius, but it ensured his position as the sole ruler of the empire. It wouldn't have been possible, though, without the sacrifice of 10,000 Gothic warriors that fought and perished for the emperor. Their sacrifice would ultimately bear dangerous fruit, but Theodosius had a long history of keeping the quick-tempered Goths under control. It seemed likely this time wouldn't be any different, yet the next several months proved otherwise. In January of the year 395, Emperor Theodosius suffered congestive heart failure and died at the ripe age of 48. His demise was both unexpected and unfortunate. On the one hand, Theodosius kept the state together and led it through turbulent times dotted with civil wars. But on the other, he was too short-sighted to properly address the issue of succession. This mistake became painfully obvious just after his sudden death, as his underage sons were ill-suited to run a vast but weak empire. The firstborn, Arcadius, meant to rule the Eastern Empire, was a rather dull and sluggish teenager who quickly became overshadowed by the power-hungry ministers of Constantinople. The younger brother, Honorius, a child of 10 sat on an imperial throne in Mediolanum, was even worse. To put it mildly, the lad wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, and displayed little qualities to become a good emperor. And, just like his older brother, Honorius was also easily manipulated by others. The power struggle in Mediolanum following the emperor's death was just as ruthless as the one in Constantinople. Rival factions vied for control over the young Honorius. Ultimately, a man named Flavius Stilicho, the legal guardian of Honorius and proven general of his father, emerged as the dominant figure. Cunning and ruthless, Stilicho was not a blameless hero, but, driven by a sense of duty, he stepped up to the challenge of keeping the Western Roman Empire from falling apart. In the name of Emperor Honorius, he had faced down the rebels in Africa, campaigned against Franks in Gaul, and even won skirmishes with the Picts at the British frontier, though the last one is likely a made-up story. Stilicho's victories were many, but his greatest worry lay in the Balkans, inhabited by a large group of allied Gothic people. He could sense that the Goths were restless and dissatisfied after the Battle of Frigidus, where they had borne the brunt of the fighting, lost thousands of their kin, and received little recognition in exchange. This sentiment was largely shared by Alaric, a young Gothic chieftain who recently rose to become a leading figure among his people. Alaric was also offended by not being given a high-ranking military command for his valor and deeds, instead being treated as an ordinary barbarian warlord. A couple of months after the late emperor perished, Alaric and his inner circle rose up in rebellion, renouncing their status as Roman foederati. At first, Alaric was joined only by the troops he already commanded, but his following soon burgeoned. Like a wildfire, the revolt quickly spread to other Goths, dissatisfied with their treatment at the hands of the Romans and desperate for a change. Carried by the momentum, Alaric set his sights high, marching the Goths east and laying siege to the imperial city of Constantinople. He demanded official recognition of his status and a better settlement for his followers. Yet a few weeks under the towering walls sobered him, and he decided to retreat to Macedonia, seeking easier targets in a further attempt to pressurize the Eastern government into granting favorable terms. Over the next 2 years, Alaric's revolt swept through Greece, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The major urban centers survived largely intact, but the countryside, as far south as Peloponnesus, was devastated. Stilicho saw this rebellion as a convenient tool to undermine the Eastern regime, and in the middle of 397 he led a naval expedition to Greece, and upon landing, pushed Alaric's force to retreat north towards the mountainous province of Epirus. This show of force of Stilicho was perceived as a threat by the ruling faction of Constantinople, namely Eutropius, a eunuch and a power behind the throne of the Eastern Empire. Stilicho's cunning move essentially forced Eutropius to react to the Gothic rebellion in the Balkans. He was faced with a difficult choice: approve Stilicho's intervention as he moved to relieve Greek common folk from the Gothic menace, or sanction Alaric's burning of Greece, making him a Roman official in the region. Unwilling to risk his position, Eutropius chose the latter. He persuaded Emperor Arcadius to declare Stilicho an enemy of the state and granted Alaric supreme power in Illyricum. His followers were entitled to the pay and benefits of regular Roman troops and also commanded the services of imperial factories they had so recently plundered. That's some late 4th century Roman politics for you. Of course, many Roman citizens didn't take kindly to foreigners who earned promotions, treating them as animal-skinned savages who brought embarrassment to real Romans. Alaric had then access to the imperial armories, where he had finally supplied his troops with adequate weapons and armor. Settling into his new role as government appointee, Alaric attracted many other Goths to join him in Illyricum, lured by the abundance of grain and gold. However, Eutropius' generous treaty with the Goths, who had just ravaged Greece, was highly unpopular among the Romans, and understandably so. In the latter half of 399, Eutropius went a step too far with his schemes, was removed from office by the emperor, and had his head cut off. When Eutropius fell, Alaric hoped to rekindle his friendship with Constantinople and remain in the political establishment of the Eastern Empire. Unfortunately for him, relations with the imperial officials gradually soured. Although the full story of Alaric's expulsion from the East is lost to the ages, it is likely that he was stripped of his Roman rank and his men were no longer entitled to legal provisioning. The Goths were a powerful and independent force, and a new agreement with them would have been political suicide for the fresh establishment in Constantinople. With no hope of building satisfactory relations with the Eastern Empire, the Goths packed up their wagons and headed west in search of a new home. Their passage over the Julian Alps was met with little resistance, as, luckily for the Goths, Stilicho was busy campaigning against Vandals north in Rhaetia. The dry weather made the rivers of northern Italy shallow, so Alaric's army was able to cross them without difficulty. Hearing the news of barbarians heading to put the grand city of Mediolanum under siege, Emperor Honorius was terrified. When the Goths got closer, Honorius fled, hoping to escape across the Alps to Gaul. His escape route, however, was cut short by Gothic cavalry, and the young emperor was forced to divert southwest and take refuge in the town of Hasta. Since Honorius was the only one who could grant the Goths with lands, titles, and provisions, Alaric followed the boy and concentrated on besieging Hasta. Stilicho, knowing the emperor's lack of bravery, was not surprised when he learned that Honorius had fled the capital. Given the rapid pace of Gothic advances, there was no time to waste. Stilicho rushed back to Italy and ambushed the barbarian army, pushing them away from the city. Alaric was forced to retreat south and pitched a camp on a rolling stretch of open farmland in the valley of the Taunus River near the small town of Pollentia. He was determined to beat the imperial host in a pitched battle, as possible victory would surely bring the Romans to the negotiating table. A sound plan, no doubt, but, truth be told, it was Alaric's only viable option. Stilicho presumed that the enemy wouldn't leave without a fight, but having seen the Goths in battle, he had to be careful not to make any mistakes. The Roman host arrived in the vicinity of Pollentia on the morning of Easter Sunday, April 6th. The Goths, by this time followers of Arian Christianity, were already bustling around, preparing to celebrate their holy day. It was exactly what Stilicho, a man of questionable piety, had hoped for. The morning sun had not yet risen over the horizon when Roman allied cavalry crossed the river. They struck without warning. Their spears cut through the surprised Goths, killing many in the initial attack. But the momentum of the Alan cavalry quickly dissipated, and they were embroiled in hand-to-hand combat. Seeing the enemy attack falter, Alaric rallied his men and tried to organize the defense. The Goths pushed the enemy back, and eventually the Alan king was killed, which caused a general retreat of the Roman foederati. But the battle was not over. Noticing that the Alan cavalry was collapsing, Stilicho hurriedly led the Roman infantry into the combat. The retreating Alans found new courage, wheeled their horses, and joined the footmen into the fray. This time, the Goths were better prepared. The enemies clashed in a frenzy of steel and flesh, neither willing to back down. The Roman footmen presented better discipline, but Alaric's warriors were motivated and probably more numerous. With no regard to their own safety, they mounted one charge after another, attacking with unbridled rage. This, however, was not enough. The relentless pressure of the Roman heavy infantry steadily pushed the Goths back, gaining ground and putting many barbarians down. With the tide of battle turning against him and his army about to collapse, Alaric commanded a general retreat to avoid losing more men. Watching the Goths run away, Stilicho allowed his men to plunder the rich barbarian camp, full of spoils of Greece and northern Italy. The battle, even if modest, was an undeniable success for the Western Romans. The Goths were not completely beaten, but had lost 5 years' worth of plunder, and much of their supplies and provisions were left behind. Stilicho knew that, and he likely wanted to preserve a chastened Alaric as a potential useful tool against the Eastern Empire. The Goths were eventually pushed back to the Balkans, and it seemed that Alaric, defeated and deserted by many of his kinsmen, would no longer be the threat he once was. Little did Stilicho know that Alaric's time for his greatest glory was yet to come.